Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're doing good and well. So for this first Saturday premiere in the month of March, I'm going to be talking about my favourite guilty pleasure movies. Yes, that's right, the films that I go back to again and again, despite feeling quite a strong sense of guilt or even shame in some cases at watching and re-watching these films. So I had to think about, when choosing these 6 films I've got here, I had to think a bit about what really makes a film a guilty pleasure for me. And you know, I sort of thought to myself, well, it's those films that are generally widely disliked by people, that get panned by critics, but despite that, I still enjoy the films. Perhaps even I recognise myself that they're very bad films, but I still enjoy them. And the other thing that makes me think of films as guilty pleasures are those ones that might actually be quite good. Excuse me, they might be good films, but I still feel a slight sense of embarrassment at liking them, perhaps for a very specific reason. And you'll find out some of those reasons, I suspect, as I go through this list. So without any further ado, I'll crack on with my list, and I will also state the IMDb rating for each film, just to kind of add an extra layer to the video, as well, as you can see what people think of these films generally, I guess, with their IMDb ratings. So let's start with the first film on my list, which is 1997's Spawn, starring Michael J. White and directed by Mark A.Z. Dippé. So this is a movie about, and this IMDb rating for this film is 5.2 out of 10, so not a great score by any stretch of the imagination. But the film's about a murdered US Marine who is betrayed, really, and then murdered, and he goes to hell, and he returns as this kind of reluctant sort of chosen leader of Hell's army. And he kind of just wants his old life back, but he's discovering all these new powers he has, Spawn. And, this was a film that had a lot of potential. And it was sort of out at a time when I think we were yet to get that avalanche of superhero films coming to our screens quite as regularly as they do now. Sort of pre-2000s, pre the Batman kind of revivification, is that the right word? Or the sort of the renaissance, of the Batman movies. And this was before that. And it was also the same year as a certain other film, which I'm going to talk about fairly soon on this list. But yes, Spawn, just not a very good film, but it was one as a teenager I loved to watch. I kind of enjoyed the action sequences despite the bad CGI in the film. I quite liked the Nicole Williamson, who plays Cogliostro, a great actor that's in this film and puts in, I think, as always, pretty good performance, perhaps one of the standout performances in the film. And also the actor that plays the Violator, I think, is pretty standout, even though the Violator is an absolutely repulsive, annoying character. He is one of the more memorable characters in this film, I think, too, to his credit. And yeah, it was, kind of a strange film looking back, but I liked the sort of the cyberpunkness to the flavour of the film a little bit as well. I think that's what drew me back a bit. I liked its dark tones, but it was just, you couldn't really take it seriously, and that was the film's biggest problem, and that's what makes it a guilty pleasure for me. So that's Spawn from 1997, first choice on my list. Next up, we have 1986's Flight of the Navigator, directed by Randall Kleiser here, and the film has a 6.9 out of 10 rating on IMDb, and that's quite a good score. So why do I feel guilty about this one? Well, I think this film is very much of its time. It has a lot of kind of quite cheesy, corny one-liners in, but I enjoy those, and that's probably the main reason that this is a bit of a guilty pleasure. So if you don't know Flight of the Navigator, I do recommend checking it out if you want something very light, entertaining, yet also kind of heartwarming. It's a bit of a comfort film for me. Even at the age of 37, I should stress this is a bit of a kid's film. That's another reason it's a bit of a guilty pleasure. It's a kind of a family/kids film, I guess. But yeah, this is starring Joey Kramer as David Freeman, who goes out into the woods. I believe he goes missing, and it turns out that he then goes 8 years into the future, is abducted by aliens, and ends up on this spaceship, meets this robo commander character called Max, and that's where you get all the cheesy one-liners coming into the film. And he has to get back to his own time because he misses his family and everything, and he wants to get back to, I think it's the year 1978 that he's transported forwards to 1986. There's an absolutely lovely scene at the end of this film. It's really beautiful, actually. And I love it when he returns to his own time and he sees in the distance his family, his little brother and his parents on a boat setting off fireworks, and cue this absolutely stunning soundtrack by Alan Silvestri. And you have actually really, I think, a special little moment in the film which is worth watching the movie for alone. And great build up to that moment in the way the film kind of bridges everything up to that point. So yeah, I like Flight of the Navigator. It's a guilty pleasure, but I think it's actually a pretty good film. So that's my next pick. After Flight of the Navigator, we go very downhill now. We go very downhill with 2012 Silent Hill sequel. To many a Silent Hill video game fans, this film is an absolute abomination. And it's a betrayal. It's a betrayal of the Silent Hill video games. The Silent Hill fans be mad at this, right? I'm a Silent Hill video game fan. I want to put that out there. I think the video games are far superior. Remember, this is a guilty pleasure. This is not me saying this is the greatest film of all time. It's a guilty pleasure. That's the definition here we're dealing with. So yeah, 4.9 out of 10 this gets on IMDb. So it's a really quite a terrible film. But I obviously have it here as a guilty pleasure. I go back to it quite a bit. And I think the reason is, there's a couple of reasons. There's one really good scene in this film. And of course, you know, why watch the whole film if there's only one really good scene? Well, I just like to watch films front to back. I don't know what it is, but I don't really like to just pick out one scene. But there is a really good scene in this film that I do like to watch. And it's where you have the spider mannequin monster. And it's kind of horrifying what he's doing to... I think it's like this woman that turns people into these mannequins, and it's kind of horrifying to watch them gradually turn into mannequins. But it's actually quite a creepy scene, and it's easily the best scene in the whole film by a long way. I mean, I think I said when I was talking about this film in one of my other videos from last year or the year before that, even now, where I was talking about this movie and saying that it's a bit of a, possibly saying it's a bit of a guilty pleasure now in that video. But it is just pretty terrible, but with one standout scene. I mean, the dialogue in this film, I mean, you've got pretty stellar cast here. Sean Bean, you've got Malcolm McDowell, you've got, you know, Kit Harington, you might know from Game of Thrones. But there's some really bad scenes in this film. And it obviously doesn't do justice to the video games. Perhaps the worst moment in the film is this scene which is between Heather and Vincent when they are discussing, you know, revelations about the Order, as it were, or, you know, Heather and her identity as she's discovering who she really is as you kind of go through this film. And they have a bit of a moment where Vincent feels he has to kind of justify how he knows what he does to her about, you know, Silent Hill and the Order and stuff. I can't quite remember the details. I don't really care too much at this point, but he kind of replies to Heather in this really kind of corny way. He goes, "Because I am a child of the Order." And then the music changes a bit, and it's just it's such a bad moment in the film. You have to watch it to understand, to probably understand. It's about the 35-minute mark. You probably don't even need to watch the whole movie, and maybe if you just want to watch that one scene, but it's probably on YouTube somewhere. You can probably watch it. But yeah, Silent Hill Revelation, 4.9 out of 10 is probably about right as a score for this film, but it's a guilty pleasure. I keep going back to it. I think partly because of that one scene, but also there's just something that's easy, light entertainment. It's one of those films that's almost so bad, it's good as well. So there's Silent Hill Revelation for you coming in here. Next up, my next choice of guilty pleasure movie is The Lost World Jurassic Park, also from another 1997 film here. So it's the second film on the list so far from 97. And this gets 6.5 out of 10 on IMDb. So that's actually pretty good as far as those ratings go. And so it's again a pretty respectable film on this list. And I just feel a bit of a guilty pleasure for this one just because I don't feel like I should enjoy this film as much as I do. I mean, it's really pretty inferior to the original, the first film, by quite a long way. But I think there are lots of great action sequences in this film. And that's what makes it for me a guilty pleasure, is that there's just some really good scenes. I mean, who can forget the scene before, well, when they're all going into the long grass, stupidly, and that guy belatedly kind of warns them, "Don't go into the long grass." And despite that, he runs into the long grass himself. And yeah, it's as you can imagine, gets a bit messy. It gets a bit messy with the raptors in the long grass. But yeah, that's The Lost World Jurassic Park as my next choice, and that is a 6.5 out of 10 on IMDb. Of course, directed by none other than Steven Spielberg himself. And yeah, I actually think, the film was actually pretty good to a point. I didn't like it when they moved the T-Rex inland, where it was starting to get involved with the public at large on streets and looking into houses and things. I thought that kind of was where the film fell off a bit. I thought otherwise this would be, a better film. Maybe I would rate it, a bit higher than 6.5 out of 10 if it had maybe just gone less over the top towards the end. All right, next up we have the shocking choice on my list, the really shocking choice. Yeah, it's Batman and Robin from 1997, directed by Joel Schumacher. This gets a 3.7 out of 10, the lowest rating on this list, man. And the reason I like this film, I can sum up in just 5 words: Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy, and that's all I'm going to say, because I mean, this film is kind of campy fun. It's ridiculous, and it's silly, and you should not really try to see it as anything more than that, because if you do, you will end up with, I mean, even less than a 3.7 out of 10. You might probably think it's like a 1 out of 10 or something like that. But, Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy makes this film, for me, actually enjoyable, to the point that you're waiting for her to appear on screen in the scenes that she's actually in. I'd love to hear from you in the comments, though. I know the vast majority of people will rightly say this film is, it's terrible, but I actually like her Poison Ivy, and yeah, I mean that's just how it is. I like Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy. So that's that guilty pleasure out of the way, and perhaps that's also some subscribers gone too. And next up we have Star Trek Generations, directed by David Carson, and this is a 6.6 out of 10 on IMDb. So for your average Star Trek fan, I have spoken to a few over the years, and they always say to me, "Oh, I don't like Generations. I don't like Generations. It's not the best Star Trek film, or it's the worst Star Trek film." And they get kind of almost a bit Star Trek elitist about it, and I see why, because it's definitely not the best of the films. It probably is one of the worst of the bunch from the original films anyway. But it's a bit of a guilty pleasure. I think unlike most people, I enjoy the union of Kirk and Picard taking on the villain of the piece here, Soren. Kind of likes the idea of the Nexus, although the film, it didn't make a lot of sense, but I still quite liked the film. I especially like the moment where Picard is in the Nexus, I think, and he's kind of having this vision with family or something like that, and it goes all ethereal and kind of mystical, and the music is sort of beautiful, and this kind of choir. You just have this amazing little scene in the film, and I think the film is enjoyable, with Data going a bit over the top with his emotions in this film as well. And I like it as a sort of about the time of Christmas or New Year. I quite like to occasionally tune into a film like this, Generations. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure for me, and it's my final pick on this list. So do let me know your favourite guilty pleasures in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. What are your guilty pleasure films? And maybe not Batman and Robin, but maybe you've got your own choices, as I'd love to find out what those are. Otherwise, from me, hope you enjoyed the premiere. Till next time, from me, bye for now.